The phone camera shook with cruel laughter as three teenagers circled the elderly woman on the sidewalk. Her trembling hands moved in desperate signs that no one understood, tears streaming down her weathered face as she tried to communicate. Something, anything to make them stop. They mimicked her gestures with exaggerated movements, their mocking voices growing louder as passers-by hurried past, eyes averted, unwilling to get involved. The woman's shopping bags lay scattered at her feet, groceries rolling into the gutter. But what hurt most wasn't the spilled food or the jeering crowd. It was the loneliness of being invisible in a world that refused to see her pain. Margaret Chen had been deaf since birth. At 73 years old, she'd learned to navigate a hearing world with grace and resilience. But some days were harder than others. Today was supposed to be simple: lunch at Morrison's diner, her weekly treat followed by grocery shopping. She'd been a fixture in this small Pennsylvania town for 40 years, ever since her late husband brought her here from California. Everyone knew Mrs. Chen. She volunteered at the library, tended the community garden, and brought homemade dumplings to church potlucks, carefully writing notes to explain the ingredients for anyone with allergies. But the teenagers who'd cornered her outside the diner didn't know any of that. They didn't know about her kindness or her losses, or the fact that she'd buried her husband and only son within 2 years of each other. They saw only an opportunity for entertainment, for viral video fame, for the hollow validation of social media likes. "Look at her hands go," one boy shouted, his phone held high. What's she trying to say? Is she casting a spell? Margaret's fingers moved faster, more frantically. "Please stop. You're scaring me, please." But her signs fell on blind eyes just as their words fell on her deaf ears. She could read lips when people faced her directly, spoke slowly, but these young faces were twisted with laughter, moving too quickly, offering no clarity. An older man inside the diner glanced out the window, saw the commotion, and deliberately turned back to his coffee. A woman loading groceries into her car paused, frowned, then hurried into her vehicle and drove away. The world kept spinning, indifferent to one old woman's distress. Then the rumble started, low and deep, like distant thunder rolling across the horizon. The teenagers didn't notice at first, too caught up in their performance. But Margaret felt it. The vibration traveled through the sidewalk, up through her worn tennis shoes into her bones. She knew that feeling. Living near Route 76, she'd felt countless motorcycles pass over the years. But this was different. This was many motorcycles, many engines, growing closer. 16 Harley-Davidsons rounded the corner in formation, their chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun. The War Dogs Motorcycle Club wasn't the largest MC in Pennsylvania, but they were respected. Veterans mostly, men, and women who'd served their country and found brotherhood in the open road afterward. Their leather vests bore patches telling stories of tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, and places they'd never talk about over beer. Jake "Hammer" Morrison, the club's president, spotted the scene first. His eyes, still sharp at 58 despite the gray threading through his beard, narrowed as he took in the situation. An elderly woman, clearly distressed, surrounded by punk kids with phones out. He'd seen enough. He raised his fist, the signal to stop. 16 motorcycles pulled into Morrison's diner parking lot in perfect synchronization, their engines creating a wall of sound that finally made the teenagers turn around. The laughter died in their throats. Jake dismounted slowly, deliberately. He was 6'3", built like someone who'd spent his post-army, years working construction and lifting weights. Behind him, his club members fanned out. Men and women in leather and denim, tattooed arms crossed, faces unreadable behind sunglasses and bandanas. "What's going on here?" Jake's voice could cut through steel. The teenagers stammered, suddenly children again instead of internet provocateurs. "Nothing, man. We were just filming this woman without her consent? Just mocking someone who can't defend herself?" Jake stepped closer, and the lead teenager stumbled backward. "Hand me the phone." "You can't." "Hand me the phone." The boy complied, his hands shaking. Jake watched the recorded video, his jaw tightening with each passing second. Without a word, he deleted it. Then he opened the phone's recently deleted folder and permanently erased it there too. "Get out of here," Jake said quietly, which was somehow more terrifying than if he'd yelled. "And if I ever see you disrespecting someone like this again, we're going to have a very different conversation. Understood?" The teenagers scattered like leaves in a hurricane. Jake turned to Margaret, and his entire demeanor shifted. His expression softened. He took a few steps back, giving her space, and slowly, carefully raised his hands. His fingers moved in deliberate signs. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" Margaret's eyes widened. Her tears hadn't stopped, but now they carried a different weight. Someone saw her. Someone spoke her language. Her hands moved in response. "I'm okay. Thank you." "You know sign?" "My daughter?" Jake signed back. "Deaf since birth. She's 20 now, studying to be a teacher." He smiled, the kind of smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I learned to sign before she could walk." Behind Jake, a woman with silver hair woven into a long braid stepped forward. Lisa Frost Donovan had been a combat medic. She knelt down, collecting Margaret's scattered groceries, checking items for damage. Other club members joined in, forming a protective circle as they helped gather her belongings. Jake continued signing. "Can we buy you lunch, please? We were stopping here anyway, and you shouldn't be alone right now." Margaret hesitated. These were bikers, intimidating. Rough-looking people her generation had been taught to fear. But they were also the only ones who'd stopped, the only ones who'd helped, and one of them spoke her language, saw her as a person worth protecting. She signed back. "That would be nice. Thank you." Inside Morrison's diner, an unusual lunch party took shape. 16 bikers in leather, vests crowded around, pushed together. Tables with a small elderly woman at the center. Jake sat beside Margaret, translating conversations, sharing stories about his daughter. Lisa showed Margaret photos on her phone, her own grandchildren, her vegetable garden, her rescue dogs. The other patrons stared at first, uncertain. But as lunch progressed, something beautiful emerged. Laughter, connection. One of the bikers, a quiet man called Books because he'd been a librarian before his army days, recognized Margaret from the library and engaged her in an animated signed conversation about mystery novels. Another member, Rosa, discovered Margaret's love of gardening, and they exchanged tips, Jake translating between them. The owner of Morrison's diner, Tom Morrison, Jake's younger brother, refused to let anyone pay. "Family eats free," he said simply, and he meant it in the broadest sense of the word. As the lunch wound down, Jake pulled out his wallet and handed Margaret a card. "That's my daughter's number," he signed. "Her name is Emily. She runs a deaf community center downtown. She'd love to meet you, and I think you'd like the people there. No one should feel alone." Margaret held the card like it was made of gold. She signed back. "I thought no one cared anymore. I thought I was invisible." "You were never invisible," Jake signed. "Some people just weren't looking hard enough." Outside, as the war dogs prepared to ride out, Margaret stood with her neatly bagged groceries and watched. Jake mounted his Harley, then turned back one last time. He raised his hand to his heart, then extended it toward her, the sign for friend. Margaret returned the gesture, her smile transforming her tear-stained face. As 16 motorcycles roared back onto Route 76, heading toward whatever adventure awaited them next, Margaret noticed something. Other diners had come outside. People were watching, but with different expressions. Now, softer, thoughtful. A young mother said something to her children, gesturing toward Margaret. The kids waved shyly. The world hadn't changed. Not really, but maybe for a moment. In a small Pennsylvania town outside a diner called Morrison's, enough people had witnessed kindness that it might ripple outward. Maybe one person would speak up next time instead of looking away. Maybe one kid would think twice before filming someone's pain for entertainment. Margaret walked home that day with her groceries, but she carried something. Heavier and more valuable, the knowledge that she wasn't alone, that somewhere in this complicated, often cruel world, there were still people who stopped, who saw, who signed hello and meant it. 3 weeks later, Emily Morrison would meet Margaret Chen at the community center. They would become fast friends, and Margaret would find herself part of a vibrant deaf community she hadn't known existed in her town. She would teach dumpling-making classes, using visual demonstrations that needed no translation. And once a month, like clockwork, 16 motorcycles would rumble into Morrison's diner parking lot, and Jake would meet Margaret for lunch. where they'd sign stories back and forth, bridging two worlds that seemed different but fundamentally wanted the same things: connection, respect, and the simple dignity of being seen.